why not go all the way to no carb, only meat, only animal products? And I want to talk about that in a short-term sense and then longer term.
Again, I think the first question you have to ask yourself is, what am I optimizing for? I think if you're someone, actually, I'll just first say, I think carnivore diets are understudied and have therapeutic applications, or probably have therapeutic applications in particular disease states. I know of lots of like clinical cases of people with severe treatment resistant autoimmune and inflammatory disorders, including inflammatory bowel disease. We actually have one retrospective case series with some pretty impressive cases um, in review right now, but where a complete elimination carnivore diet probably is tremendously therapeutic. Maybe where nothing else is. In part because of the ketosis induced, in part because of the elimination of things that could be irritants. And so, if you're someone with Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis or various autoimmune disorders, psoriasis even, um, this could be beneficial for treatment, therapeutic treatment of that disorder. Now, I want to be very clear. I wouldn't extrapolate from this that this is the best diet, that this is the optimal primal human diet. I don't think that's the case. I think we evolved as omnivores. And my issue with discussion around the carnivore diet is that one of the things that keeps it fringe and hinders research on it is that people tend to get very evangelical about it and make claims like it is the optimal human diet. That claim is not supported by the literature, nor claims like it'll improve longevity. That's not one you really hear a lot about, but like I think people try to jump from like somebody's recommending this diet for X. Say I use it for inflammatory bowel disease. Then they intuit for some reason that I believe it's a great diet for longevity. And it's like, well, how could you possibly argue that this promotes longevity? I'm like, I never said that. I'm not talking about that as the use case. So again, this works best when we caveat and target and are precise with our language. I would say carnivore diet, potentially therapeutic for particular use cases, acutely, probably will help a lot of people lose weight, probably will help with particular disease conditions. Long term, I will be skeptical or concerned about potential impacts on the microbiome, and I would not argue it's optimal for longevity. Speaking about the microbiome in particular, microbiome science is really messy. I don't think a lot of it's very solid. Speaking at a high level, though, we are meta-organisms. What I mean by that is you have your human cells, and you have many more microbe cells in you, and the composite there is the human microbiome meta-organism. And your microbiome massively influences your health. And in general, more diverse ecosystems tend to be more resilient. I'm not just talking about the human body. Think about a rainforest, or think about a coral reef. The more diversity there, the more resilient it is to environmental insults. And what is metabolic flexibility but resilience to metabolic insults? So from that perspective, I would say over the long course of time, if possible, eating a whole foods varied diet has logical basis for being good. But it's also true that we really don't know what a healthy microbiome looks like other than the microbiome of a healthy person. And because of the world we live in now, some people might just not have microbiomes that can handle it. I'm one of those people. If I could, I would love to eat especially Brussels sprouts with walnuts is the example that I always bring up because they would just wreck my stomach. But I love them, the taste, and I think they're healthy food stuff. But my microbiome can't handle it. And people can say, oh, you just do a protocol, titrate it in. Yeah, easier said than done. Changing your microbiome and protocols for that are really difficult. And just because a lot of us have grown up eating standard American diets or might have other insults. So for me, I had a fever when I was a tiny baby, a neonate, and I got intravenous antibiotics. And we know that can screw up your microbiome potentially for life. I think IV antibiotics as a neonate increase your risk of ulcerative colitis, which I developed by 500%. Later in life, I developed that in my early 20s. So I might just have a screwed up microbiome and need a more therapeutic diet that's lower in fiber. I do tend to eat lower fiber diets, and that's me. But I can separate what I think is best for me therapeutically from what kind of might make the most sense at a population level, but I don't know what boat you're in. So that's kind of my high level take on carnivore. I think it's fascinating. I think it deserves further study. I think it can truly help people. I don't think it's the best diet for all human beings. And that's, of course, setting aside ethical and environmental issues, which are a whole different kettle of fish that then get wrapped into this discussion about human nutrition because people just get emotional over this topic. So
I'd like to take some time and go a bit deeper into the fiber piece as a whole, in a general sense, very high level, because it seems like low carb, carnivore, keto world, there is a group of people that say fiber's bullshit. Fiber's, they would say it's detrimental to your health, and we don't need it. I'm obviously paraphrasing and bringing a lot in there. But then there's the people that they tend to be more in the plant-based world that talk about eating diversity and coming back to what you just said, building that diverse microbiome and getting as much different types of fiber from plant material as we can to facilitate that microbiome. So again, comes back to that confusion piece where you have people saying two opposite things where fiber is either useless or detrimental. And then other people are saying it's the greatest thing and we need to focus on that. And it sounds like you're somewhere in the middle, but just talk a little more about how you feel about that realm.
I'm going to tell you how I'm going to communicate this, and it's going to involve a flex for a purpose. Because I want to show that I actually do think about this deeply. So for those listening, I'll give a high-level answer so everybody can follow along. And then I'll dig deep enough that I almost guarantee even your most expert PhD plant nutritionist will not have known this. Okay, high level. Some people respond to fiber well. Some people respond to fiber poorly. This has been shown. There was a trial out of Stanford, including Sonnengard, I think was the senior author. I forget which journal. It was in a Cell or Nature Press journal. I think it was Cell Metabolism or Cell Host and Microbe. I can send you the link. It was in 2021. But basically they showed that some people, I think it was about 2/3 of people, have fiber and they have an anti-inflammatory response. But 1/3 of people have fiber, they have a pro-inflammatory response. So high level, people respond differently. Okay? So it might be good for some, it might not be good for others. Let's keep it simple there. Now, digging in a little bit deeper, one level, that'll go even level deeper. What predicts if somebody will have a bad response to fiber? It probably is their baseline microbiome composition. So in the study I mentioned, they did also find that people that had the bad response to fiber, where they had more inflammation, also had less microbiome diversity. So that raises the question, well, is the fiber bad, or do you just not have the machinery in the form of microbiome to handle it? So like, is exercise bad? No, exercise is not bad. But if you've never lifted before and you go try to deadlift 400 pounds and like pull a muscle, exercise isn't bad. You just weren't ready to handle that load. So one could argue that you need protocols to improve your microbiome health. Again, these are difficult things. But I think one could argue for making the body more resilient to fiber, even just being a litmus test for overall health, if it's possible. For some people, it might not be. For me, it might not be. Now, I'll give you a specific example about how fiber could be helpful. This podcast, I guess we're not live or anything, so this will probably drop after the video is released because it's a video I have in production on a microbe called Desulfo vibrio. But I was reading a lot of literature recently about GLP-1. And GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide 1, it's the hormone that drugs like Ozempic try to mimic. Massive weight loss benefits, at least when provided exogenously at supraphysiologic doses. But what we also know is that people with insulin resistance disorders, PCOS, metabolic syndrome, obesity, tend to have less GLP-1. So why is that? That's an interesting question. It's not really been known, but one thing that was just discovered in this paper that I'll be covering is that there is a gut bacteria called Desulfo vibrio, which higher levels are associated with lower levels of GLP-1 in mice and in humans. And they were able to show a causal pathway. Again, you need mice models to show this causality. but basically whereby disulfovibrio produces a lot of hydrogen sulfide as part of its metabolism, overwhelms detox systems in the gut, damages mitochondria in L cells that make GLP-1, leading to a GLP-1 deficit. Now, there are various interventions that can deplete disulfovibrio levels by competition, in part particular fibers. So there was a randomized controlled trial in 2015 showing that inulin fiber at just 5 grams per day for 21 days could deplete disulfovibrio levels by, I think it was 42%. And so what you can see here is a picture whereby you could have this biological cascade where having fibers, the right type of fibers, in someone with metabolic syndrome who has low GLP-1 could shift the microbiome in a way to deplete levels of a microbe that are basically poisoning the cells that make GLP-1 and thereby be therapeutic. And it's been shown that higher fiber, in some trials, improves, signs of metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance. And it hasn't been known why. I'm not saying that this is the core mechanism. I just want to highlight that the metabolic and physiologic complexity here is intense and very cool and highly specific. But unless you're someone who actually knew what I just spewed at you, I would suggest being humble in your claims about fiber, because it's a very complex and interesting field. It's one of these Dunning-Kruger things where it's like the more I learn about it, the less I feel I know. And then there are people on the internet who are like, I know the answer. And I'm like, can you spell disulfovibrio or tell me about hydrogen sulfide metabolism and how they affect, L cells and the GI system? And it's like, we need a little bit more humility in this space, I think, especially around carnivore.
How do you feel about trying to prop that up, the gut microbiome, using probiotics, different strains, there's so many different types of probiotics out there now?
I would say if you have the means, it's fine to try. There are some that are more reputable. I think seed probiotic is probably the best one I know, just because of the lab it comes out of and the studies that have been done on it. But in general, the data on probiotics is not that good. So if you're going to spend money on a supplement, I would not make it a probiotic if you have a budget. If you're a multimillionaire and you want to, try around with different probiotics and see if it affects you, then great. But I have not found the data on probiotics to be that compelling. I think if you want to do the best thing for your microbiome without spending a ton of money, starting with fermented foods, kimchi, natto, properly fermented pickles. If they're actually fermented, they're going to be in the refrigerator aisle. Just by the way, you're not going to go get like some, pickles just at the, jar pickles that aren't refrigerated. But yeah, kimchi, natto, sauerkraut, titrating those in a little bit. The data show that can help with microbiome diversity. So you can start there. If you want to add a probiotic, I don't think most are going to hurt you, but I have not been compelled by the literature yet.
And given what you said there about fermented foods, is that something you specifically take in your diet to get the different benefits from them, or is it something you can take or leave?
Take for what?
Take or leave. Is it something that you're specific about? Like, I'm going to get sauerkraut, kimchi. Every other day I'm going to incorporate some within my keto diet just so I'm getting different benefits. Or is it just more when it happens, that's cool?
Different strokes for different folks. I would say I could put it in the category of, if you're tolerant of it, then maybe it is something you can target to optimize. I would put it in that category. I don't think there's any singular food that people need, but I think there are some that are just like good. Like I always target fatty fish in my diet. Do people need to eat fatty fish to survive? No. I think they should eat them. Fermented foods is in that same category, whereas like if you already kind of like it and you would enjoy it, like you'd enjoy some like good sauerkraut on like, your burger, get it. I do think it's far more likely to have benefit than harm. But if you don't like it, then don't eat it. Don't like force sauerkraut down your throat. And then things like kefir. I really like making blends with Red Mill Farms goat milk kefir. I prefer A2 dairy. They don't sponsor me. Like I haven't mentioned any like sponsors or anything, and this is just like the brands I would use. And so I might have some of that kefir with my breakfast. Maybe I'm having like smoked salmon and eggs, and I'll just have a glass of kefir.
Trying to get at though, are you having that for specific benefits, or you just like the kefir?
I would say I would have it for specific benefits. I think it's worth going out of one's way to consume fermented foods if you like them, all things being equal. If you don't need them, but I would say that they're probably worth targeting in a diet.
If you enjoyed that clip, you're going to want to head over here and catch a full episode. I'll see you over there.
Towards the end of college, I started developing GI upset with basically anything I ate. So I ended up becoming quite desperate, and after trying a bunch of medications that didn't end up really working to keep me in remission or help my symptoms, tried a bunch of different diets because I was desperate.